ink being an element of permanence, basically signifying a process of not letting, like, of not erasure. Like, it's a process that I allow it to react and then I accept it for what it is. So the process itself teaches me more about how to deal with the human condition, how to appreciate the the turmoils of life, sitting with the mess, basically sitting with the mess, accepting it for what it is. That's how I directly link it to trauma. So basically, trauma is something that shapes who we are as individuals, but they are not necessarily visible on the skin. So me including or incorporating the trauma scars on the skin is a testament of adversities overcome. Basically, wearing it as a testament of like a badge of honor, rather than being like ashamed of it. Because usually our traumas are hidden. We choose not to show it to the world because these are elements that would put us in a state of vulnerability, in the most vulnerable state. So it's just a redefined version of like seeing what trauma can be in our lives. That is what I choose to represent in my works.
So would you say that every time you do residencies, let's say for example, around here and in Ghana, do you source the materials that you use locally, or do you come with the soils that you use in your artwork?
So yeah, I think one major part of my work that is very prevalent is the fact that the soil has to be a place that I encounter rather than me moving with the soil. So it's, I mean, there's land everywhere, basically. So the core message isn't necessarily sourcing sand from elsewhere. It's about discovering the land. So me sourcing the soil can come from me just being interested in the culture of the place. Even the material itself, it's having like a specific feature that I'm interested in. It could be the texture, the color. So it's more of an interest in the connection with the area that I'm in. That is what influences the kind of soil that I source. And it's basically bringing these different geographic planes together by forming like a geographic topography, like a maps of different areas, maps of different lives, memories, time. Because the soil being a witness of different people walking around, like it has basically witnessed countless lives. So it's like an archive of that particular memory and time that I'm interested in when it comes to me sourcing the soil. Yeah.
The inspiration behind what we have seen in the cool room, in the gallery over there, like you have various art pieces that you have worked on in your residency. Like I'm interested in knowing what inspiration you had, because like we have had like a deep and meaningful conversations when we were basically procuring some of the materials that we did. But what I would like to know now is the inspiration behind all those pieces, because you didn't come up with them when you were in Ghana, for example, but you got inspiration from around here, and you got inspiration from the interactions that you had with people around here. Yeah, so why then did you decide to put it in your works?
The inspiration, like you're right, the inspiration comes from life, basically. Me associating with the people that are here in South Africa. It's basically, it has been like an eye opener. It's been a really interesting experience living with people with different cultures, different beliefs. I think this diversity is what my core take in my practice is about. The fact that I can unite these entities, these elements of like diversity. Even the materials that I use are diverse materials. I use sand, charcoal, ink. So it's all about how these elements come together to form one thing. So me being a part of something that shows diversity is something that influences so much about my work. So there's a piece that I have that has a symbol called the conjoined crocodile. This is a symbol from Ghana, a Dinkra symbol. So it's a symbol that basically has two crocodiles sharing one tummy. And this symbol signifies diversity in unity. How two crocodiles with two different heads sharing the same stomach. So either wherever the food goes, it goes into the same stomach, but there's a contradiction of the crocodiles wanting to have the taste of the food. So it's that interplay of choosing to adapt with something that you're not familiar with, even though whatever actions you take brings the same results for the entire community. So I think that's a kind of narrative that I work with when I move into a new space. The diversity, how I can incorporate the diversity that I encounter in the new space with what I'm already familiar with as well.
Yeah. The scar-like tissues, the scar-like textures on the tissue of the skin in your winning work are basically visually striking. What do they symbolize, and how does street art influence your studio practice?
Okay. I made mention that the core philosophies of my work, it's more about the process that it takes me to get there. It's more about the process than it is about the image itself. So the process teaches me a lot about myself in terms of me adapting to be, like, accepting to be human, basically. So you mentioned the scar tissue. So like I said, it's an element between salt and ink. That process of it happening spontaneously, the process of these two elements meeting and reacting in time, teaches me to let go of control, basically. So it's more of allowing the elements to react, seeing it for what it is, ink being an element of permanence, something that cannot be erased. So I basically directly link that gesture to trauma, because we sit with our traumas regardless of whether we appreciated it or we overcame it, basically. So the process of me watching the element or the material that I'm using be itself, be its natural self. Sometimes you look at the work and you're like, I was hoping you turn out this way, but it does turn out the way it turns out because that's what it's supposed to do. So it's me sitting back, allowing the work to do its thing. Even with the sun that I use, it's basically like a collaboration with the weather or the environment. After pasting, I allow the sun to do its thing. So depending on the weather condition that day, it determines where the cracks will appear in the work. And it teaches me acceptance of that particular process. So it's after that I sit back, view the work in terms of it being a mess, and then now treating it with care. So my practice is more about taking care of that element itself in a way that I sit with it. So it takes me through a lot of emotional roller coasters, having to accept it for what it is and then having to do something about it. Like basically the duality between the beauty and the pain. That is what my practice is about. Yeah.
So, like the use of unconventional materials in your artwork. How do you pay homage to the source? How do you pay homage to soil? How do you pay homage to graphite? You use pencils a lot, as your name entails, Nana Pencil. So how do you pay homage to the source?
Yeah. So I don't see the process of me working with sand as an extraction, because I believe the soil is an entity. It's basically an extension. We are an extension of the soil. So it doesn't seem to me like I am extracting a material from somewhere, and then the homage is in me understanding the essence of what it is, and basically giving it a different form. So that the paintings that I make, the figures that I paint, aren't images using a material that is just unconventional. It's me extending that entity, the belief of us being in our rawest elements. That is what we are. And how the material itself behaves teaches me how to appreciate me, myself, being a human being as well. Yeah.
Much appreciated, Nana. We're going to move on to Yolo Mantiyane. Yeah. Look, you incorporate cow dung as primary artistic medium. What cultural and symbolic significance does this material hold to you?
So when I started working with dung 3 years ago, it was inspired by the practice of usinda, which is the act of flooring or polishing the floors using cow dung. And the reason behind this was I suppose I was really plagued by the as a young black Nguni person who grew up in the rural Eastern Cape. I was very plagued by the idea that certain practices, certain cultural understandings around like language are slowly but surely dissipating. You know, we are migrating a lot as young people. We are no longer engaging in language in the same way. So our understanding about who we are and what language means is we are slowly but surely losing it through globalization, through anglicization, you know. So I was thinking back to the structure of the mud hut back home and seeing the women in my family flooring, and I was really fascinated by dung as a potential painting material. And I was very fascinated by that movement, that visual movement, that circular movement, and also umqwaqo, which is the decoration of, sorry.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Which is also that thick application or plastering of the mud homes, right? And so through that exploration, I was very fascinated by my own understanding. I'm always teaching myself or engaging with my own culture because I believe myself as a student. So, I mean, the only way that I really understood and how you research, right? So as a student, academically, but also as a student of my own culture, practicing that, you know, and engaging in cultural practices in different spaces that I was finding myself in. As an artist, and also as time goes on, we can't necessarily move backwards. Tradition and cultures are constantly changing and evolving. So I felt it as my responsibility as a young Guni person to how do I practice my culture when I'm not in rural Eastern Cape. Yeah, so that's what that cow dung really is about. That's where it originated for me. But as I have been collecting, engaging with people, because in order to collect the dung, I have to go to people's spaces, engage with people who have cattle. Conversations come about, understanding of why is cow dung so significant spiritually to Black people. Cow dung as a connectivity to the ancestors, cow dung as certain procedures that as a young person you might be learning because you are in community, but what happens when you're removed from community? So I was learning a lot. I was learning that you can't collect cow dung from another family because people are very suspicious about that. Or if you are collecting, you have to engage with people and have conversation and develop understanding. And once those conversations are happening, also finding out that you have to go into the crawl space, state your business. When you go there, speak to whether you believe it's the cattle, whether you believe it's the ancestors that are embodied within the cattle. It means that the dung is an extension of those cattle, then that ancestral power is also has to be respected, right? You can't collect if the cow have left the crawl space. If they have left the crawl space, then it means that you have to come back. So I'm constantly learning, but the dung is always informing the work. Yeah, and that's where the origins came from, but it's always evolving. The meanings, I'm always kind of deciphering what it means as the work is happening.
Okay, that's quite profound. I'm sure many of you have seen her work, right? If you went into the gallery there to see her work. My next question is based on the inspiration behind the work. Like you once told me through our conversations that we had at the residency about what inspired the work, and you said blankets. Has it always been blankets, or do you do other works that are inspired by any other thing? And the blank one, there's a blank piece that you have made. I would like to know what that means.
Do I make? Yes, I do make other works that aren't specific to the blanket. But for this residence that we are currently, I have been thinking about the blanket a lot. This is kind of like a work in concept or an idea that I've been thinking about for like 2 years, and I've only really been able to make the work in residency because you have the time, you have the resources, you have wonderful people like Nico to go help you get the dung right straight from the source. But the work that I do outside of the blankets was that connectivity between cultural moments and cultural context. So I started off using the animal subject, the cow, as the slaughtering, rather, let me say, the slaughtering of that animal, that cow, and capturing that moment, because those are moments that only you can really only witness if you're part of the community, right? So capturing those moments and in connectivity to the dung, so that animal subject in relation to the practice of usinda is there, but also depicting the crawl space within by carving it in the images that I was making. So the animal in relation to the dung has been what I have done previously in the past, but like the blanket was a thought process behind the blanket as an object of like shelter and care and protection, right? Because context-wise, I was thinking of the dung as it was used as like within the structure of the mud house. So I found that connectivity of the blanket as a signifier, one, through various stages of your life. You get that baby blanket, which is that small blanket that you will see in the cool room in the exhibition space. And then that larger piece is the blanket of my mother, my father. That is essentially the blanket that they bring out every winter, and I suppose it's the blanket that they bought throughout the union. And so I suppose that was supposed to be it was a depiction of that moment in their lives, right? Their adulthood. Maybe it was their first blanket when they got married. Who knows that story? But we also have blankets I mean, you grow out of your baby blanket at some point, and then you have to buy another one. And you mentioned something when we were in the studio that I was hence that blank blanket. So it was the beginning, the current stage, and then the last blanket. You know, the one that shrouds you as you enter, you know, your grave. It covers your coffin and enters the ground with you. And I suppose that piece I was kind of stuck for a while because I didn't know, you know, I haven't died yet. And you don't necessarily even know really what it's going to look like until that moment. And someone else picks it for you. You know, you don't know what it's going to look like. So I suppose it was kind of significant in that way, to kind of choose to leave it blank. And, you know, if you're also thinking about the dung as part of the earth, you know, that also kind of, there's a connectivity there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we really do have a blanket for each and every a stage of our lives. When you leave maternity ward, they cover you in a blanket. When you sleep, you cover yourself with a blanket. And culturally, in most African cultures, when you die, they put a blanket over your coffin. So, like, my interactions with Yolo over time, it showed me the significance of the blanket, how much significant it is to, like, in the growth of an individual, like each and every individual, how much it's significant throughout the stages of our lives. So, like, it made me have a certain appreciation for blankets.
And as you leave, you think about that, right? When you're leaving your home for the first time, whether that's for work, maybe it's for school, you're probably you're covering. I mean, you're traveling with that, so maybe that's a piece of home for you. I think hence that kind of also that idea of it as protection and shelter. It kind of harkens back to where you come from, your origins. Yeah.
That's nice. Over to Aloka, Trevor Aloka. He calls me Charlie. I don't know why, but yeah, Charlie. Like, I've seen your work, and I've found it very interesting, especially the kind of materials that you use to do your work, and like the connectivity between your canvas and embroidery work. And your work explores memory, everyday life, and communal living. Why are these themes central to your practice?
Yeah, first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming, everyone. Yeah, so these themes are central to my practice because yesterday we had a conversation with a counselor. Was it yesterday? Yesterday but one, I think. The day before. And then we were asked, do we get to draw a line between our practices and our lives? And then my response to that was, I don't have a line between the two. My life is my practice. Yeah, so when you ask how are these themes, day-to-day events, day-to-day happenings, experiences, why are they central to my practice? It's because, like, this is my life. When you look at my art, I tell my experiences, I tell my stories, and also, as I do this, first of all, my practice makes me make sense of the world, of things that happen in my life. And as I get to tell these stories, I later disown them to the audience to also look at themselves within the work. Yeah, so I'll share more on this at some point. Okay. Yeah.
And what inspired your use of hospital documents and layered mixed media techniques in your winning work?
Yeah, so as I just mentioned, that my work is derived from my life, my experiences. these receipts that I work with have been collected over time. It wasn't deliberate at first. My mom having been diagnosed with cancer years back, being a caretaker of her from a very young age, escorting her to the hospital. As a child, I didn't know the reality of things. I was, today you're not going to school, you're pushing me somewhere. I would just be happy about that. I'm not going to school today. But then fast forward, I think around COVID, I got to learn about what was actually happening. And these receipts had accumulated. We'd been getting receipts since 2008. So you can imagine those would be a lot of receipts. So my mom wanted to discard them off. But I thought they were a big part of who she is. They were also a big part of who I am. I've been sharing and mentioning that whenever we talk about cancer or any serious illnesses, we tend to mostly gravitate towards the patients, think about the patients, but we forget to think about the caretakers, the people that are in the lives of these people. So that's why I get to say that I also thought that these receipts are a big part of who I am as a person, as much as they were a big part of who my mom is. So yeah, I asked her that we shouldn't throw them away, keep them. I sat on them for some time until last year. I was doing a residency back home. I figured I could do something with them. So what I've been doing over the years is, as I push her to the hospital, as we are at home, at everywhere, whenever we are, I'm always taking pictures of her because she's my Chale, she's my friend. Chale means chomi, yeah. It's a word from Ghana. So I'm always taking pictures of her. So last year when I was doing this residency, I revisited these receipts. And as I work with them, I always go into the archives, the pictures I'm always taking. And then the family album, in this exhibition, I had some portraits of my mom that I've worked with, her younger self. And yeah, that's how I got to working with these receipts. Yeah.
The embroidery, like the embroidery aspect of your work, did you learn that anywhere? Who taught you that?
Embroidery is something new that I just brought into my practice. I started doing that here in residency. It's something I thought about last year, and then as we would always speak to Dr. Powell, the meetings we would always have online, Genevieve and the entire team, they would always advise that you should start thinking about the things you would want to do in residency. Yeah, so this is something I'd wanted to do for the longest time. And when I came here, first of all, when I speak about my work, I'm always speaking about care, love, patience. But then I've always felt it's not entirely enough just to speak about these things. I wanted for the person seeing my work to see these things in the work. So that's where the embroidery comes in. If you look at the works that I embroidered on, you will see that a lot of time has been invested in it. A lot of labor has been involved in that. These my colleagues can attest to that. Yeah, and then back home also, this is a feminine skill, doing embroidery and beadwork. And as I would take care of my mom, this is something I've been sharing with those that I've had a conversation with. Most visitors would have home would ask my mother why she doesn't have a girl child around to help with anything a woman would need. But then her response always was, Trevor gives me anything, does anything I would need. So I don't think I need particularly girl to take care of me. So embroidering and doing the beadwork, this being a feminine skill, and then it's a boy. I don't want to say boy child. I'm not a child. Okay, a boy child. At least I'm a child to my mom. A boy child doing this thing becomes a performance in its own right. You get taking care of my mom as a boy child versus doing this feminine skill. You get. It's not just about speaking about it, but also bringing the experience to the work. Yeah.
Like, we have had like conversations before about telling where someone belongs by just looking at them, like with the recent immigration crisis that we are having in South Africa and all of those things. I've asked you a question about how can you tell a person, like how can you tell about the originality of a person, where they are from, by just looking at them? Like, do you find similar contrast to what you make or the works that you create to yourself? Can a person tell by just merely looking at you? And this is a question for every one of you, that can, by just looking at you, can they tell that this is Yolo's work or this is Nana's work?
I look at my work. I believe so, partially. I think because so many people have relation to dung as a material. I mean, I'm pretty sure where you're from, various like Bantu correct like cultures use dung as a material. I mean, Aloka was telling me that there's an artist back in Uganda who uses dung in their artwork. They can definitely tell that I'm black. I can say that much. And their culture, and so much about my work is inspired by cultural nostalgia. So I think that cultural identity of being black and being a Bantu person is first and foremost in my work. And I think that shines through in the work that I make. I definitely believe that there's a connectivity. There's a connectivity between what people identify when they look at my work and then they find out, oh, okay, this is kind of how you grew up. This is where you're from. In terms of like a rural space, I think that reminds them of home. It's in the same way that it reminds me of home.
If I'm understanding the question really well, can someone tell my identity by just looking at the work? I think one of the core factors of my work, choosing to bring together different geographic forms into one being, one of the things that isn't really permanent is even identifying the various soils that come together into making one piece. And I think I say this to say that I don't think just looking at me would show, like, looking at me and looking at the work shows a connection between me, because I work with the different soils because I'm interested in bringing the togetherness of it. The whole ideology of it is not distincting the various soil that make up the different human forms. Basically, this is the rawest element of our being as well. So it's more of breaking that that mirror that shows that we are identifying with a specific form or a specific identity. It's basically, no, you can't see the different cells that go into making a piece by just looking at it. And I think it's similar to us, how we can't tell the difference between the human form at its rawest element. That is why I choose to express the cell by combining the different forms, different colors into one piece, and it's not necessarily visible by just looking at it in that way. So if you are directly linking it to identity, my whole practice is basically breaking down the barriers of where we belong in terms of land and in terms of identity as well, by merging the soil with the human core essence of the human essence. Yes, that is what I choose to, that's how I see my practice to be. It's basically collapsing those boundaries of identity. Yeah.
The reason why I asked the question, how do you pay homage to your artistic medium, is entirely something that I thought about this morning. Like, I work in construction, and most of the time we use materials that we source from different places, but we do not think about the makers of, we don't necessarily think about the makers of those materials. We don't think about the person who bakes the brick. We don't think about the person who mills the iron sheeting and all of those things. So it made me think, like, as part of our creative process, do we really think about the cow? Do we think about the miner who mined the graphite? Do we think about the worker in India working at a plantation for cotton and all that? Do we really think about in the process of making our work?
Definitely. You definitely think about, well, I definitely think about the cattle while I'm sourcing the material. Because when I mean, outside of here in Irox, when we went to the field and we were collecting, while the cattle were outside in the field and grazing, but maybe it's just my relation to animals, but I speak to them while I'm there, you know. I say hi, I say thank you as I'm collecting, in the same way that I have seen and kind of, I suppose, taught through, that I was taught through witnessing other people speak to the ancestors, speaking to cattle, however you want to interpret that. State your business, Fanubike. Here I am so and so. We would like to come collect some dung. It's for this reason. That is paying homage, respect, respecting the animal, thanking the animal, being, giving. Yeah, it's about acknowledging the animal, but also I believe it's also a form of acknowledgement of the space that you're in, and how sacred what you are working with is in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. You spoke about the graphite being a medium that the miners that mine the material, how I pay homage to that. So it's no more about the graphite. I use charcoal, and charcoal in my culture signifies purity. It's an element that is used to purify or cleanse, basically. And in the core process of my making is the act of purification, looking at the process where I can't make a lot of control. I don't have a lot of control over sitting with the mess of what it is, and now purifying. Basically, like the scary elements that are in my work. So it's more of me applying a sense of care and purification to the being that I'm creating. Just in relation to how even when you take poison, in my culture, you are given charcoal to regurgitate the poison out of your body. It acts as an element that conflict, like the fights with the poison in the body itself. Yeah. So I think me using the charcoal to represent that is how I pay homage to what the charcoal signifies in my culture. That is what, not necessarily the element itself, but it is still a natural element. It being wood that has been through a different process. You get it? Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so the question would be the question you asked, how do we pay homage to the themes we speak about, the people we walk around versus the materials we use? The things I incorporate in my work, the seed beads, what they signify here in South Africa, back home, the embroidery I do, how it's looked at back home, here, world over. I think the intent behind already does give homage to these themes and the people associated. Speaking of, if you did see my work, the pieces that have the embroidery and the plants in them, these have to do with them being supplements to the body, adding iron to the body. They are also used as, they would also be regarded as herbs. So this does give homage to indigenous knowledge, indigenous herbs, like you get. Also, talking to the seed beads, how they're used back home and how they're looked at, them being something very private and sacred, and them using them here. This is me acknowledging their significance, however much I've exposed them, and yet back home they're very private. Also, how they're used here, making traditional attires out of them and then having them exposed. Yolo did share about that. It was a very big culture shock for me. So exposing them does in a way pays homage, I want to believe, yeah, to how they're looked at here. Thank you.
Sure. With that said, this brings us to the end of this engagement.